An important piece of everything is value creation. And in this module, we're going to talk about value and value creation. Chris, talk to us about value.
Well, value is so vitally important, Scott, in anything that we do, right? We don't do things if they don't have value. And I think that's important. And I know with just your background and what you've been through, talk to us a little bit about, when you think of value, what are some things that you think about?
Yeah, I think, the first thing is that value to me is subjective, okay? Mm-hmm. So you might put one value on something, I might put another value on it. And so we really have to look at value from the perspective of the customer, the user, right, that type of a thing, as opposed to just saying, well, I think value is this and that's what it is. So value really begins with what the user wants out of the experience.
Yeah, fantastic, overview on that. And believe it or not, that's practically what ITIL says. So let's take a look at this. Value, a definition that you definitely need to know. Value is the perceived benefits, usefulness, and importance of something, as you can see right here. And that might be important if you're answering questions in a small lit room. Now, as we said, Scott indicated, most important thing, value is a lot of times subjective. Now, there is objectivity. Again, coming back to that utility. Does it do something? If it does something, then okay, it should have some value. So that's an objective thing that we can look at. But sometimes it's more of a matter of perspective. And typically when we look at this, notice a little diagram we have here where it talks about cost and speed and quality. We used to call these the triple constraints, right? And we used to say that a lot of times people want all three. They want something cheap, they want it quick, and they want it quality. And of course, the infamous phrase was like, look, you can maybe have one or two out of those, but you can't have all three. And I always use the example of if you want to have some good Mexican food, right? Let's say it's lunchtime and you're sitting there. Now, if you wanted to, you could go down to a Del Taco or a Taco Bell, which is down the street here, little fast food restaurants here in the United States. And, I'll tell you one thing, it's going to be cheap.
Absolutely.
It's going to be fast, right? Quality.
Maybe
on that there.
It depends.
It's a horrible, right. Now, let's say we go to, you were sharing the story about being out in Sierra Blanca, outside of El Paso,
Blanca, Texas.
And you went to this really nice, a restaurant. And again, was it cheap?
It was cheap.
Okay, yeah. Now,
cheap.
Probably, here's the indicator. Was it fast? Probably not as fast as a Taco Bell.
It was not as fast as a Taco Bell.
But was it quality?
It was very good.
Yeah.
It was original.
Yeah, it was good stuff, right? And that's the thing, is if you go to a more fancy restaurant, you're going to get good quality, but it's not going to be cheap, and typically it's not going to be fast. So that's where a lot of people, when they look at things like a product or service, I would say your average person, that's kind of one of the things that they use. All right, I need something fast, right? I need something quick. Well, okay, does it need to be quality? Yes, we want it to be quality. Well, then it's not going to be cheap. You're going to have to pay for that to make it quick and quality. If you want something that is inexpensive, but quality, it's going to take time to create that. So it's not going to be quick. And so you're always going to be sacrificing a little bit from one of these three areas as you're moving through. So the other aspect is, and you mentioned this, the subjectiveness of it. We have a diagram here that we're putting on this slide here, and thanks Tyler, by the way, who's our amazing video guy. And so you can see here we have a Venn diagram, all right? On the Venn diagram, you have three circles. The top one says business outcomes, or B&O for short. Then below that, you have two other circles. One says preferences, and the other one says perception. So think business outcomes. In order for something to have value, it needs to do something. It needs to create an outcome I'm looking for. That's just part and parcel, as we would say. It also, sometimes it's going to be preferences. A good example of this is, do you prefer to be entirely in the cloud, or maybe you want to be on-prem, on premises? Okay, that's a preference, right? It's still, you can still get the same business outcome whether you have it, equipment yourself or you have it in the cloud. Then there's that third circle. And this is the one that usually kicks us in the keister, as we would like to say. And the reason why is because it can be true or false. But if somebody has a perception that something is not quality, fast, or inexpensive, it doesn't matter. A good example of this, I always share the story, is I'm kind of tactile, right? I like, if I could, I just write things down. I have my notebooks. I know you do too. Cards and everything else, right? And so when and I'm an Apple guy, and I got my iPhone because my family has iPhones, and so I do that. But one of my favorite phones of all time was the Galaxy Note, because it had the little stylus, right?
Right.
So I had a Galaxy Note 3, I had a Galaxy Note 4. Now, I tried to get the 5, but I was living in England at the time, and I don't know why, but you couldn't get them, right? You couldn't get the 5, right? But then the 7 was going to come out, and I'm like, I am getting myself, Scott, a Galaxy Note 7. Can you tell me why I wasn't able to get a Galaxy Note 7?
Something about some fire, flames, something. I don't.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's as we like to say, you didn't need to be a liar for your pants to be on fire. Is essentially what was going on.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. They did research into this, and Samsung lost a lot of money because they recalled all of the Galaxy Note 7s. And I believe the S7 as well. And so you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. And they found out that it was the battery, but the battery producer that they used was only being used in about 2%, I think I have the numbers right, of the phones. But it didn't matter because you're going to just pull them. Here's the deal. The next thing they came out was with the Samsung Galaxy Note 8. How do you think the sales were on that Note 8?
Probably not very good.
Now, here's the deal. Let's think about this. Scott, if you're the development, director and, VP kind of level guy, are you going to allow the quality control and assurance issues that were in the past happen again?
Not at all. We're on top of it.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
We're on it.
Yeah, you're on it, right? You're like, no. We're going to do extra. We're going to make sure that we check these things before we send them out. Test them, right? Because you can't lose hundreds of millions of dollars.
Again.
But here was the perception. People heard Galaxy Note, and they all remembered, oh yeah, they explode, they blow up. But they wouldn't. They really wouldn't. But it was a perception issue that it probably took Samsung for a little while, because at that point, they were pretty much climbing up. They were approaching the Apple stage of how many people were buying and using their phones. And it went whoop, and it was a perception issue. And that, again, it's not true. They don't blow up. They're great products. But I perceive that they're bad. That's the difference. And so, very important when you talk about the perceived benefits, usefulness, and importance of something, right?
It's also perception is reality. We've heard that so many times,
oh my goodness,
right?
yeah.
Like perception's reality. It's not necessarily the truth, but it's the way that people perceive it that becomes their reality, and we can't really control that at that point.
Yeah. So what we have to do is, as much as possible, continue to provide good quality, fast, the price points and all that thing. Because, there's even people that go, oh, well, this thing is too expensive. Well, is it? I mean, Mr. Finance guy here can break the numbers down and go, actually, over time, this is actually less expensive than going with this.
That's right.
But people go, but the price tag, well, okay, you got to do that. So there's all these things that we need to look at, right? Okay, so let's talk about the value proposition. The value proposition is basically when a customer is going to talk with the service provider, and they're going to say, all right, I'm going to, as part of this exchange, this great exchange, I'm going to be transferring costs and risks over to you, so that way I get the outcomes that I want to. So here you can see we kind of have a illustration of this, a set of scales here, where on one side you've got the supported outcomes, the costs removed, and the risks removed. And on the opposite side, on the left here, you can see you have affected outcomes, costs added or imposed, and the risks that are imposed or introduced. I think we use the word introduced here. So achieving desired outcomes requires that we're going to have to, we are going to have to spend some money. We are going to have to maybe take a certain risk, but at the same time, we want to have that outcome that we want, and we don't want all the other costs and risks that are involved. What you mean by the value proposition is that most times customers are going to be doing this. They're going to be weighing it, going, all right, am I removing more cost, removing more risk, and getting more supported outcomes, the things I want to have, versus I'm affecting other things that I do by using this particular product and service, that's affected outcomes. And am I actually adding more cost or adding more risk than what I'm actually removing? And so it's this kind of a balance that we look at. Now, interestingly enough here, Scott, can you think of any point in time where on this side, we obviously think we want the right side here as you're looking at it, the outcomes that are supported, the costs removed and risk removed, you want to be more, right?
Correct.
And could this happen where it's either even or maybe a little bit the other way, where it still would be considered valuable? Can you think of any type of a situation like that?
I can think of many situations like that.
Yeah.
The government regulation, right? The fact that I've got to meet certain standards or do certain things for payroll, for employee safety, all of that stuff.
Yeah, and because at that point you're thinking, well, if I don't do this, I can't stay in business. So yeah, I am going to have a little bit more risk and I am going to have a little bit more cost on this particular service, but what I want to do, and this is why it's, this is why we're all in business, right? And this is why we do this, is because we have to consider it overall for our organization, overall for our company. So let's break each one of these down just a little bit. First, we do need to know the difference between outcomes and outputs. This is a big thing in IT service management. A lot of times, the reason why this is an issue is most of us, and I include myself in this up until I really got started into ITIL and IT service management, was I treated the exchange as more about, well, what am I getting? Well, I'm getting a server, I'm getting a switch, I'm getting a router, or I'm getting a piece of software, and that is what is the most important, right? But let's think about that. These tangible or intangible outputs that we get, the deliverables that we get, they're important because you need, as you notice on this definition, an outcome is the result for a stakeholder that is enabled by one or more outputs. So you need outputs. The problem is that an outcome is not necessarily the same as an output. Now, we're going to give you a little illustration of this here in just a second, but I definitely want you, just for a second here, make sure you take this note down that the output is that tangible or intangible deliverable that comes out of, we would say, some sort of activity. You have an input, you work on something, you get an output, right? Typically a product or a service that comes out. Then you've got the outcome. It's the result the stakeholders wanted that is enabled by one or more of those outputs. So make sure that you understand that. Now, why it's important is because of this example. Now, it's funny about this one, Scott, is that I did not, come up with this slide and this example about wedding photography. However, I don't know if you knew this about me, but at one point, I was actually a mobile DJ.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it Sir Chris-a-Lot?
No, I wasn't Sir Chris-a-Lot. I was DJ Woody.
DJ Woody.
DJ Woody.
All right.
Yeah. Well, and I actually worked with a company out of Albuquerque called Dunn's Dancing Machine. Long story about, how my fiance, knew them and it was college and, hey, you got to make some money. Well, one thing about living in Albuquerque is it's kind of I call it a little big city. It's the largest city in New Mexico. It's just, you go there to Albuquerque, but it's, it's not very large. I mean, I think it's like 700, 800,000 people, and it's the biggest city in the state. So you pretty much know a lot of the same people. And so one of the things, of course, when you do these mobile DJ things is that you do corporate events, school dances, and weddings. Thus this example that you see here. Now, as you do this, Scott, obviously you're going to be encountering the little big town, same caterers, same photographers, videographers, and everybody. So we all knew each other. And over time, you're like, oh, hey, I see this one guy, and his name was Kevin. And Kevin's photography, top guy, great, Bridal Magazine, used to run his stuff. And I would see him every once in a while, and he told me this story about this couple that came to him and said, hey, Kevin, I know we booked you, but a friend of ours has offered to take our wedding photos, and he has shot photos for National Geographic, and he's gonna do it for free. And so Kevin's like, well, I can give you a discount, but I can't beat free. And so he says, yeah, sure, no problem. And so that goes on. Well, of course, little big town, right? So about 2 or 3 months later, he encounters this couple at another person's wedding, and they come up to him and they say, hey, Kevin. And he's like, oh, hey, how's it going? How was your wedding? And they go, well, it's good, but yeah, we probably should have stuck with you. And he goes, really? Why? And they go, well, remember how we told you our friend was a photographer? And he goes, yeah. Well, remember which magazine he was shooting for?
National Geographic.
National Geographic. Yeah. He was a wildlife and a landscape photographer.
Yeah, not the same.
Not the same. And here's what he gave them. Pictures of the church, the flowers outside of the church, the inside of the church. And now there was a couple of pictures of the wedding party. Yeah, that was there in the wedding. Yeah. And then at the reception, it was the centerpieces and the buffet. Now, here's the thing. Take a look at this. We can give you outputs. In this case, you're going to have well-captured photographs. You're going to have high-quality photo printing. You're going to have a well-arranged photo album. Those are outputs, right? Those tangible things. But what is it that the people are looking for? They want the memories, right? The preservation of memories. So my wife and I, as of the recording of this, been married 34 years. And I got to tell you something. Every anniversary, Scott, we break out our photo album, which, by the way, shot by Kevin. We weren't going to make that mistake. And we look at it because a lot of those people aren't with us anymore. And so we bring back those memories. That's why we have that photo album. So I know we're using that as an example, but think of that from an IT perspective. Can I throw a whole bunch of equipment and software and people doing things for you? Yes. Those are outputs. What is the end game? What is the outcome that you want to achieve? We want to save money on our energy utilization, right? We're in a building and, server rooms suck electricity like nobody's business. Well, what if we did in the cloud? I mean, we're paying pennies, compared to that, and we're saving. So what is the outcome? We're wanting to save money is the outcome. Because a lot of people go, well, why did you switch to the cloud? Is it because you just don't like, equipment? No, it's just, we want to save money.
Efficiencies, right?
Efficiencies. And so these are reasons why we would say that's the outcome that the customer wants to achieve, whereas the output of like, I'm using a cloud, I'm using AWS, I'm using Azure, that is going to be the thing, Scott, that we do there. Okay? Make sense?
Makes sense to me.
All right. Plus, now you know who to get your wedding photography. Kevin, give Kevin a call. I don't even know if Kevin's still there at Albuquerque, quite honestly, and you probably like that. Everyone's like looking it up, Albuquerque, Kevin's photography.
Now what we need to do is have Kevin pay for a sponsorship of this.
Oh, yeah, I know. Oh, see, I knew that was coming at some point. All right, so speaking of costs.
Speaking of costs.
You like that? Costs coming in? Costs are something that we also need to look at. Now, remember, there are two types of costs. Now, I get that. And I know Scott's brain was already running going, when I go, there's only two types of costs. He's like, no, they're not. Mr. Accountant here, there's sunk costs, there's opportunity costs, there's all these types of costs. In the world of ITIL, there's only two types of costs. And that is costs removed, costs imposed. I want to write that down. Costs removed are, the money that we save by using that service or product. Costs imposed is what we pay to use that service or product. And sometimes that can also include costs to, like, well, in order to receive that service, we need upgraded equipment. So we're going to have to pay for some of that. So just remember, it's not just I'm paying, Acme Incorporated to do something. It's Acme Incorporated requires us to also have upgraded equipment and the network and all those type of things. So one of the things we would say is, okay, let's make sure that we, have all those costs considered. But then there's also, we would say not only imposed, but costs removed. Is what is the money we're going to save by not having to maybe have employees? If you're using a managed service provider, I don't have to hire an IT guy or guys and gals. We get a whole bunch of them. We're using the managed service provider. So those are costs removed by the service. This is a part of, remember, that value proposition. Both types of costs need to be considered. So, for example here, let's say we use some sort of managed service provider and for our company. Well, you've got the costs removed by that service provider that are going to be the staff that I mentioned, the technology, it's their stuff, any other resources that are associated with maintaining maybe our network, right, or networking capabilities. Then there are the costs imposed. You actually have to pay that service provider, right? And they're not doing it for free. The service provider staff training, where perhaps they're not familiar with your particular product or your particular, so you've got to pay to train them on that, or they're going to train you on their stuff, and so you have to pay for that. Could be network utilization fees, especially if you're talking about infrastructure as a service or platform as a service. There's a cost for the utilization of that equipment, so you might need to pay something like that. Okay, so that's costs.
Got it.
Two costs.
Two costs, removed and imposed.
That's right. So next, we're going to take a look at risks. Risks are where we take a look at number one, what is a risk? A risk is any possible event that could cause harm or loss or make it difficult to achieve the objectives. Now, here's the dealio. A lot of people look at that and go, yeah, that's how we view risk. It's very negative, right? It's the threats, the risk that comes at us. However, as a risk management professional, certified risk in information systems and controls, C-risk, let me tell you something. Risk is more than just the negative. Risk can also be positive, the opportunities, whether you take an opportunity or not. By taking one opportunity, you might then have that opportunity cost that we were talking about where you lose out on something else. So there's positive. I always use the example of my brother-in-law, Steve, who math teacher, but he lives in the Arizona and goes out with his friends to Laughlin and Vegas because he loves like blackjack and stuff like that. And one of the things that he does is he takes a certain amount of money with him because he's very smart, no credit cards, just a little bit of money. And he goes down and I'll just give you a number, $100, right? So he goes in with $100. And as he's playing, and he's pretty good at this, blackjack and all these things, because he's a math guy, and so he knows the odds and works it out. So he just enjoys sitting there. That's his entertainment. He plays and plays. Well, when the money's out, the money's out. Now, here's interestingly enough, when he's playing those risks, and it's his money, he's probably a little bit more cautious. However, let's say he hits it big, and he doubles his money. What Steve does is he takes that original money and puts it in his pocket. Now that $100 he has is, he calls it, I think, mad money, where he just goes, oh yeah, oh, those double sixes that hardly anyone ever hits, yeah, I'm going for that, right? Why? Because now it's opportunity. That risk is now all positive. There is no negative influence on that. So that's why we mean by there's positive and negative. Does it make sense?
I got it.
Okay, so let's take a look at this. Again, two types of risk. Risk imposed, risks removed. There's going to be risk removed, may include, failure of a hardware or something like that, because now it's no longer there, right? But what we want to make sure is that not only do we consider what we're removing as a risk, and that can be done through, what they call the four ways of handling risk, negative risk. Avoid, mitigate, accept, or transfer, where you pay like insurance. Well, no matter what you're doing, you're trying to remove that risk from you, and whether you do that through your service provider or yourself, that's the goal, right? Or you're trying to get it up. But you always take on risk by using somebody else. And so let's use that same example here. So the risk remove, we already talked about it. Servers crash, routers get, miscombobulated, cyber attack or something like that. That's now removed from us and it's placed onto the service provider. Lack of expertise. Well, they're technically better than us, so they're able to do that. However, remember, there's going to be a risk imposed on you. What happens if Joe's IT company goes out of business? Okay, now what do we do? They had all our data. They were handling all our stuff. Our website's down now. What are we going to do? So that's important to consider. Information security breach, kind of like what I mentioned now. They handled the cybersecurity attack, but it was our data and information out there. Not good. And then, of course, things like loss of network connectivity. You see what I'm saying here. There are things that are removed, but there are things that are imposed. This is all a part of the value proposition. And as it says here, in certain cases, a service cannot remove entirely all the risk. There's still going to be what we call risk residue or residual risk. There's also going to be added risk that happens when you respond to one risk, and then there's what they call secondary risk that pops up. So you need to, again, outside of the ITIL 4 foundation course, just understand, we're not teaching all this you need to know about risk management. You still need to know and understand those things. But for the exam, 2 types of cost, imposed, removed. 2 types of risk, imposed and removed. That is the value proposition.
Value proposition, cost, risk, we have it all from DJ Woody. And in our next video, we're going to talk about relationships. So we'll see you there.